Live with CDP Sports Talk, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Anchor FM, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and TuneIn. Now, here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to season 13, episode 54 overall. Season 13, episode 54 overall, episode 714 of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by your friends at Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership, located at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Automall. Check out their website, barrycullen.com, for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, along with a great selection of all-electric vehicles, EVs, as well as Cadillac vehicles as well. You can call the dealership at 519-824-0210 and tell them Chris Palme sent you, or you can email them at info@barrycullen.com. Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership has been family run and operated here in the city of Guelph since 1969, and they have been a sponsor, advertiser of Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show for the past 3.5 years and counting. I hope everyone is doing well on this Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. I am feeling a little bit better. I picked up a nasty cold last week, unfortunately, and I'm just fighting the last of it off as well. And I've had a busy week covering the Argos training camp, as well as being at the Cheesecake and Taco Festival on Saturday in Paris, Ontario as well. So please check out my social media pages for some of my content from the Cheesecake Taco Festival. That was tremendous as well. I was supposed to have a guest on today. Unfortunately, she had another work commitment, so she had to postpone. We'll try to reschedule with her in the future, but I had to call on Audible. If you know what Audible is in football and sports, it's a quarterback has to change the play. Things don't always go smoothly in football with plays, and that happens with talk shows too, with booking guests, and sometimes things happen at the last minute. But I was able to get somebody to fill in for our guest today. His name is Nick Small. He's the co-host of the Argo Bounce podcast show, but he's also the host of his new podcast show called A Small History Podcast, about his visit and journey to Japan this past December as well. So we're going to talk to Nick a little bit about his trip to Japan, about his new podcast show, and of course a little bit about the Toronto Argonauts as well. So we're going to bring on my friend and co-host of the Argo Bounce podcast show, Nick Small, right now. Good afternoon, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Chris. Thanks a lot for inviting me. Glad to be here. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Pretty honored as the Audible. I like to think of this Audible as me being the wide receiver out running a fly route for the touchdown home run play. So let's make sure we make sure of that today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And you were on Robbie Schneider's podcast last night, the 716 Sports Blizzard podcast as well. So, and you're on a couple other podcasts too, but I believe.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy couple of days recently. And yeah, to your point, I was on the 716 Blizzard podcast. So I was just talking a lot about the Toronto Argonauts yesterday with Robbie, as well as just kind of sports talk in general, a little bit of Buffalo Bills, Sabres, Canadians. So there's a lot of different things to cover there, and one of the nice things is that no matter whether we cheer for different teams or different leagues, sports is one of these weird things that tend to unite people as much as it does divide. That interest that you have over sports is one thing that kind of a lot of people can relate to, in that there's some sort of identity and some passion and care for their team, wanting them to succeed at whatever their respective sport is.
I also wanted to mention too, Nick, I know you're not a big NFL fan, but the Philadelphia Eagles finally traded A.J. Brown away to the New England Patriots as predicted for a first-round pick in 2028 and a fifth-round pick. I personally don't feel the Eagles got enough for A.J. Brown. The Patriots were desperate to get A.J. Brown to add to their receiving core in Drake May, and they really wanted A.J. Brown, and I felt that Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, should have squeezed him for another draft pick on top of the two, or to get an active player off the roster. It's nice to get A.J. Brown's a great player, but the last year or two, he was becoming a distraction to the team. So I do understand why the Eagles moved on from A.J. Brown, and they drafted a couple young guys in the draft. But I don't feel a first-round pick and a fifth-round pick for one of the top 5 receivers in football is enough. But as you know, Nick, CFL, NFL, it is professional. It's a professional business now. Even to some degrees, college football now, especially in the States, is now professional as well. And the OUA too, it's a business.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to a lesser extent the OUA, but yeah, what I always find is a big challenge when you're trading players away for draft picks. In a way, you're kind of hoping that the team you trade with fails so that they get into a worse position for that draft pick. One thing that I think is important to know from what I saw is that the first round pick they got was a 2028 draft pick, so it's not necessarily what they accomplished this year. And I mean, they lost in the Super Bowl, right? This past season.
Yes, so right now
so
they would be picking the pick right now would be a 31st pick.
Yeah,
so
so
they're
I
hoping
mean,
the Patriots will not be as good 2 years from now.
yeah, you think, yeah, to that mentality, you're kind of hoping that maybe that does push them over the top. They win the Super Bowl this year, and then you have that post Super Bowl hangover. You guys are asking for too much money, and guys start to flee elsewhere, and then hopefully by 2028 they do not as well. I know it's nowadays, maybe not so much in football, but especially in hockey, there's a lot of these conditional draft picks where if that protect the bottom of the draft, so if the team does horrible and they've given away their first round pick, well, if they drop to the bottom 5, well, they actually retain the pick and they lose the year after instead, which I don't know. It's a little bit of gamesmanship, I think, at that point, but yeah, it's something important to think about from a management side when you're making these risks. I think the OHL is a good example of this, where sometimes you see these mammoth trades where you can't trade your first round draft picks in the OHL, but you see like 6 or 7 or 8 draft picks go for one guy on a team trying to make a playoff push. So it's pretty risky when you look at like the Bulldogs in Brantford, who they have no future now because they have so few draft picks left. So that's the kind of thing you worry about, I guess.
Well, the Kitchener Rangers traded a ton to the London Knights to get Sam O'Reilly and Jarrett Woolley. So congratulations to Kitchener on getting the Memorial Cup in 2026, their 3rd Memorial Cup. But Kitchener next year will not be as good because they just traded a whack of draft picks to the London Knights as well. Your Kitchener, I guess that's okay, but I like their traditional jerseys better, but that's a nice one. But Kitchener won the Memorial Cup, but they're going to pay a price next year. London knew they weren't going to get to the Memorial Cup this year, so they knew they had assets in O'Reilly and Woolley, and Kitchener paid the price, and now they've got a Memorial Cup for it. But next year is when they're going to pay their price with all those draft picks going to the London Knights as well. Congratulations to the Kitchener Rangers for winning the Memorial.
As a Rangers fan, I'm obviously happy for that. Being a Lourdes student, I got to go to my fair share of Rangers games there at the Odd, and it's one of the most iconic arenas. Between like the jersey, which has the alternate jerseys, probably one of my favorites in all of sports, because that logo really epitomizes the Canadian soldier in the First and the Second World War. It has the British style round helmet, not the Americanized helmet. It really puts a Canadian identity, where like compared to their primary and away home and away jerseys, it really does kind of resemble more the New York Rangers. No offense, like historically that's who they're based off of and we're affiliated with. But yeah, to win a Memorial Cup is something that can never be taken away. And in the essence of OHL and junior hockey in general, you typically see these cycles where you prime up, you go for that big year run, and yeah, you tend to be on a decline after you win a big thing like the Memorial Cup. It's very rare that we see the same team go to win their league championship multiple years, and it's a bit unfortunate too. Now that next year's Memorial Cup is going to be in Guelph, stone's throw from Kitchener, and if you were following the bidding process, you know that the Rangers were the finalists among the bidding between them or Guelph. So it's a little bit unfortunate that you kind of expect that the Rangers are going to be on the decline next year and in a bit of a soft rebuild, but you never know, and that's the fun of sports, and especially junior hockey, where you never know what kind of group of kids you got, and if you got the right guys, hopefully they'll make a push for it. But yeah, huge congratulations. Mike McKenzie and everybody in the Kitchener Rangers organization, such a huge accomplishment, and something that they'll always be remembered for, no matter how the professional careers go for these players. It's something that they can be proud of for the rest of their lives.
And Mike Farwell, who's the voice of the Rangers since 2018, this was his first Memorial Cup call and win. And Mike's been on my show a number of times. He's with 570 News in Kitchener, so I'm so happy for him as well. Hey, Nick, before we get into a little bit about your Japan trip, and then we'll talk a little Argos, NBA Finals, Knicks Spurs, who do you see winning that series?
Hopefully the New York Five of Me's.
I've got San Antonio in 5, and then the Stanley Cup. We've got the Carolina Hurricanes and Rod Brindamore taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. Freddie Anderson against Mitch Marner. Holy Mackinac, Maple Leafs are involved in the Stanley Cup this year.
Well, if I had to pick, I really like Rod Brind'Amour's coaching style. As someone who's a Habs fan, it's very emblematic of Marty St. Louis, and you kind of see like it's easy to criticize and poo-poo on how the Habs went in the Eastern Conference Finals against Carolina, but you have to remember Rod Brind'Amour and the Hurricanes have been at this for 4 years now to push into it. So it's been a long time coming for that organization as well. And I think, when you look at how things went in that final, you can kind of see where the experience and the lessons learned from being there and coming up short the past few seasons is something that I think the Montreal Canadiens could really take away from with their young core group of guys. And I've said it before, the best thing I think for Montreal is that you didn't have Kent Hughes make some stupid trade of, again, talking about draft picks. They didn't trade 3 draft picks away to get one guy who might push them over the top this year, and then really struggle like the Leafs draft scenario, for instance. Yeah, they've got the first overall pick, but one kid in his 19-year-old year is not going to turn the Maple Leafs around, no matter who it is. So I think that they're in the right strategy where the Habs still can only build and get better from where they are. And I mean, you saw the emotional farewell that Brendan Gallagher dealt with the media yesterday during locker cleanout, and it is an unfortunate thing. Like as a fact of sports, as a fact of life, when teams decide to move on from certain players, it's hard to accept. But we're really proud of everything Brendan Gallagher's given for the organization, the Habs as well. So I'm wishing him all the best wherever he goes.
I've got Carolina winning in 6 games, but I wouldn't be shocked if Vegas wins it. I really do feel that these are the 2 best teams, and John Tortorella has done a great job with Vegas. Mitch Marner has really done well fitting in that system. I agree with you, Nick. I got Carolina winning, but I think it's going to go 6 or 7 games. And Rod Brind'Amour is one of the best coaches in hockey. And John Tortorella, whether you like him or not, maybe he's a jerk, the players seem to play for him, and he might not be the best long-term coach, but for 1 or 2 years, he can get a lot of your players. And it's really helped Vegas because they fired Bruce Cassidy, 8 games before the playoffs. And you might see that as a future trend now. Other teams say, hey, Vegas did it, we'll try it as well. Usually at this late point of season, it's usually too late to turn it around, but obviously it worked for Vegas. So Tortorella, I think if Vegas wins this cup, I think that's just going to cement his legacy as a Hall of Fame coach if he gets the Stanley Cup win, especially what he did on this kind of notice. So we'll see. I think it's going to be – I'm going to go with Carolina in 6 over Vegas, and I'm going to go with the Spurs over the Knicks in 5. Nick, last thing about the sports before we get into your Japan trip. Blue Jays are 29-31. Everyone's feeling good about them. But to me, 60 games they've played, they're 29-31. Every time they get to 500, something else goes wrong. They're definitely not going to win their division this year. The Jays, I'm going to say this, are very lucky that the American League is as weak as it's ever been. Out of the 15 teams in the American League, there's only 5 teams that are over 500, and 2 out of the 5 are barely over 500. So the Blue Jays still have a really good chance of getting into the playoffs, but I don't think this team is going to be going back to the World Series in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I think when you look at how it went last year, there's definitely a lot of they sort of embraced it, the kind of all heart mentality, very similar to how um, not just the Montreal Canadiens this past playoff push kind of had similar vibes to that. I think they really dig into that sort of nationalist mentality, whether you agree with it or not, or if the idea of being the only team in Canada that has a professional baseball team. If you use it in that mentality as fuel, it's certainly a motivating factor. But I think in a lot of ways it's kind of that when you have a team that sort of makes that unexpected Cinderella run that deep in the playoffs, and with such a short off season from playing in the World Series in late October, almost as early as November, and then having a really short window to then regroup and rebuild in February, March for the next season. That's only 2 months off. So like it's just really hard to have that short an off season. And throwing up the Habs again, I hate to use them as the example, but when you look back at their last playoff run when they lost in that COVID season to Tampa, they had 2 months of rest going into next year. They were horrible. And even though Dominic Ducharme outcoached Sheldon Keefe in the first round of the playoffs, they ended up firing him just a couple months in when they were frankly horrible, but also they were marred by tons of injuries. And we've seen that with the Jays as well. You see Jose Barrios, who's didn't even play a single game this year, I believe, or very few. Nope. Tommy John surgery, and you have all these other guys who have dealt with injuries on and off. That small window of the off season just amplifies all the injuries that they had dealt with during that playoff push. At least that's the way I look at it. And you could even argue that it's happened to other teams in sports. You look at the Argos and how last year they really struggled and injuries were a big problem. Even though they've made deep playoff runs the last couple seasons and won 2 Grey Cups, like at some point that those injuries can sort of amplify and just kind of take a team out of it early.
That's why you're not going to see too many dynasties in sports, Nick, with the money involved, the free agency. It's just so hard to win year after year in professional sports. I don't think we're going to ever see a team win, like the Buffalo Bandits of the National Lacrosse League won 3 straight championships. But in the big 4 sports like the NFL, NHL, NBA, even soccer, it's very difficult to repeat. And every year in sports is different. What you did last year, Pinball Clements told me this, what you did last year doesn't translate to what you're going to do this year. And as much as the 24 Cup team was nice, even Pinball said 2025 is different. And obviously it was. And last year the Argos had an off season, 5-13, but there's no reason why they can't turn it around. Same with Ottawa as well. In sports, you should be able to turn it around. It shouldn't take you 10 years, but unfortunately, there are some pro sports teams like the Detroit Red Wings where it's taken them 10 years now, and we'll see. But Nick, go ahead.
All right, just to be real quick, well, the LA Dodgers is a good example. Like for as dominant as everybody says they've been the last 5 years or so, they've only won 2 back-to-back championships right now, and then you have a 3-year gap before they last won in 2020 during COVID. Yep. But then what was it? Yeah, I mean even in other sports, yeah, it's you don't like hockey was a little bit weird in that we've had kind of some impressive runs with Florida and Tampa, but yeah, it's hard, and yeah, to be consistently good in multiple years is always a challenge. Basketball is another good one. I like look at all the money some teams like LA throw at their players, and they're not in a big playoff run right now. It's the nature of sports, and that's what makes it exciting and enjoyable to watch. Money doesn't mean everything.
Absolutely. Hey, Nick, Can you just tell us about your 3-week trip to Japan back, I believe, in November, December, and why did you choose Japan to go to visit?
Yeah, it was. Well, first off, it was unbelievable. Like it's just an amazing place to visit, and for me personally, it holds a lot of special meaning. Um, it's a long story, but um, my whole interest in Japan really comes from my studies at university. I took I took political science originally is what I majored in as a student, but once I kind of got into my second year and I had more opportunities to fit more things in, I decided to double major in history and political science, and I was always interested in the Second World War history, and as I got older, I became more interested in the Asia Pacific War, because it's frankly not talked about a lot in Canadian history because we're so focused on what Canada did in the European theater of operations in Italy, in France, in Normandy, and in the Netherlands. So I became interested in learning about the Asia Pacific War, and then through that, I became interested in learning about history of Japan, and it just kind of spiraled from there. You can go down a huge rabbit hole of stuff because Canada, I find I don't like to say it doesn't have a lot of history because that's not fair. There's a ton of indigenous history that has been um, oppressed by colonialism, and sometimes just not well documented because of the way it passes down through oral traditions more so than written history, which is kind of the more Western ways history is written. So, but Japan has a lot of that written history, and there's all these other cultural elements that tie into it. A lot from China and Korea, which date back more than 2,000 years. So it's a very different way of looking at history, and that's kind of where I got really interested in then wanting to finally go and see some of these famous places in Japan, Fushimi Inari, Ginkakuji, Kinkakuji, Sensoji Temple, and all these other different shrines across Japan.
Nick, what was the flight like down to Japan? A long flight, and also did you suffer from jet lag as well?
Yeah, so I believe it was a 15-hour flight, if I remember correctly. I left from Toronto in the morning. I think it was probably around 6 or 7 a.m. I actually flew to Montreal on a 1 hour connecting flight and then flew direct from Montreal to Japan. And it was, yeah, I think roughly around 15 hours, maybe a little bit longer. I can't remember exactly. But put in perspective, I left I think it was November 15th, if I remember correctly. It was by the time I landed in Japan, it was the evening of the 16th. So it was almost with between the time zone and the difference in flight in the air, it was the evening the next day in Japan when I landed. So in essence, I kind of lost a day of travel. So it was the evening the 16th, but the jet lag, it really wasn't too bad. I follow a lot of travel stuff, so I look at a lot of travel advice. And one of the things that one of the big travelers in the U.S., Rick Steves, he does a lot of tour stuff on Europe, and he always said one of the best things you can do as soon as you land somewhere, no matter what time it is, go for a walk. And that's exactly what I did. So when I landed at Narita Airport, which is about a half an hour train ride, if you take the express train from the airport into Tokyo proper, where I was staying. So I got there in Ueno Park. I think this was around 5, 6 o'clock at night. And from the flight, like I mostly just wanted to rest and take it easy. So I just kind of walked all the way south into from Ueno Park, maybe 3 kilometers into where my residence was, and I just kind of used that as an opportunity to relax and just kind of take things easy. So the jet lag wasn't so bad. When I got home, though, that was a different story. There was the first day I got back, I went to bed, and it was probably around maybe 8, 7, 8 o'clock, so fairly early. I went to bed thinking, oh, if I sleep until 10, then it's fine. I woke up at 3 in the afternoon the next day, or that evening, like late the next day. I was completely out of it, and that's where I found I felt the most of the jet lag coming home, not so much going there.
How comfortable was the flight? And also, when you got off the flight, Nick, the language barrier was in it. Was there people that spoke English, or did you have to learn Japanese?
Yeah, so good question. The flight was okay. I got really lucky in that in our three-person or three-seat row, we actually had an empty seat between us, so it was amazing from that respect. So that separation definitely helped, and it wasn't so bad. Um, it was what it was. Like I tried to mostly just nap or like just kind of watch whatever in-flight entertainment they had. I had some music saved, so just kind of and read a bit. I had a couple books on a book on Japan to just kill time. But the yeah, arriving there, the language barrier in Tokyo, it's not so bad, and especially around the airport and some of the major stations on the trains where you're going to have a lot of tourists. There's typically the information tour guides speak relatively fluent English, and where I went, the it's called the Golden Route. If you go from Tokyo to Kyoto and Osaka, those three are kind of the main three cities that most tourists go on their first visit. That part, most places people were good and knew enough English for a basic conversation. But I have respect for them. I tried to speak as much Japanese as I knew, and I have been, because I've wanted to go and study Japanese history for a PhD. I've been practicing the language. Speaking it is by far the hardest. Reading, listening, I would say is next hardest, and then it's reading and writing is a little bit easier when you have the time to do it. But overall in those cities, it's not bad if they know enough English that you can ask really basic questions. But when you get to some of the smaller places, Uji, Nara, there you have a bit more of a language barrier. And even those cities are not like super far out of the big cities. But if you go to some place kind of in the boonies, some parts of like rural Hokkaido, which is the little northern continent, places like that, there you can get into trouble pretty quick. Where if you don't know any Japanese at all, you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Nick, can you just tell our audience your first impression of the country of Japan as a Canadian and some of the cities that you ended up visiting in your 3 weeks plus time there?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating. When I took the train over, because Narita Airport is kind of in a more rural area outside of the Tokyo metropolitan area, it you see a lot of farmland, and in certain spots it really didn't feel that much different from like taking the route up north to like Huntsville or something in northern Ontario, Muskoka. But so when you get into the city, there's kind of this weird contrast at times where it's really really urbanized. It's the largest metropolitan area in the entire world. It's like if you put five cities of Toronto together, that's how big it is. But at the same time, what Japan does really well is accommodate the green space even in some of its densely populated areas. There's some spots like where I went in Sensoji Temple. There's parks near the Canadian embassy, and it's so quaint and quiet and calm and peaceful, and that you wouldn't think you're in a city of however hundreds of millions of people are living in there. It's the way it kind of juxtaposes itself is incredible. And then when you go to other cities, Kyoto's a great example of this. You have all these skyscrapers and buildings. When you get to the borders of it, where the mountains are, where all these big shrines are, it really feels removed from the hustle and bustle of city life, which was really interesting. And then you go into Osaka, which is known as Japan's kitchen and is probably more urbanized even than Tokyo in a lot of ways, with its skyscrapers and its entertainment districts. And that is more full blown kind of city experience like you'd see in downtown Toronto. The population density I found there was more than in some parts of Tokyo. I would probably rank Shinjuku and Shibuya on the west side of Tokyo as being more urbanized than the east side in Asakusa or Akihabara, just from my first thoughts. But yeah, how there's that balance urbanization and modernity, but there's still a lot of value in tradition, in the religion of Shinto and Buddhism is reflected there. There's that really neat balance of it, which was really fascinating coming from Canada.
Thoughts on their public transportation in Japan from where you visited?
Yeah, so I will preface, I only went on the subways. I didn't go by bus on anything, so I can't comment on that. But I really enjoyed the transit system there through the train network and the subways. The Shinkansen was really fun to ride, although it might be a little bit expensive. It was around maybe a little under $150 for a train ticket from Tokyo to Kyoto or Osaka. But when you compare that distance to being about the same length as from Toronto to Montreal, and you're talking about a sub 2 hour train ride on the Shinkansen in that distance, as opposed to sometimes 4 or 5, even 6 hours, depending on the freight delays. The for probably around 100 to $150 Canadian one way. It's probably more bang for your buck in that respect, and in the time you save. So that was interesting. And then the train network can be a little bit confusing at first, but one thing I found that was really helpful was that rather than using an IC card, which is kind of an equivalent to like the Presto card that you have in Toronto that you tap on and off, if you use the ticketing system, you always insert your ticket when you go into the gates, and then you have to insert that same ticket to leave. It really helped when you were getting lost around transfers, because if you're at the wrong station or you're taking a wrong exit that leads to a transfer terminal to another line as opposed to a direct exit, it will literally spit out your ticket and not let you through and be like, hey, you can't go this way. So it makes it really foolproof in trying to not go the wrong way or get yourself lost. If you know a little bit of kanji or even a hiragana, two of the three languages, written languages, you can find your way relatively well. And even without it, there's a little bit of English at most of the stations that can help kind of map it out based on the price points, and that kind of helps you navigate. It's easier to explain when you have a map drawn out, but it didn't take me too long. But I can understand where some people can get really lost or confused. It's a lot of information overwhelm if you don't do enough research beforehand.
What was the overall friendliness of the people there that you met?
Yeah, anybody who I spoke to was really helpful in like um, positions of authority, positions of power, I guess. Between like people who worked at museums and were as tour guides or whatnot, or people who worked as cashiers or service workers at wherever your restaurants or around the subway station or whatnot. They were all really friendly. I found when you're on, for example, the trains, people tend to be really kind of to themselves. There's not a lot of, you might have like small 2-person quiet conversations, but sometimes you don't have as much sort of direct interacting with strangers maybe as you might see here in Toronto, for instance. It's a lot of where people kind of more keep to themselves or sort of mind their own business, I guess is the best way to put it. But when you needed help, like if you asked people, most people were open to help. And I don't know if this was me, but it was funny because even some people came to me asking me for help, and I don't know whether it was because I was a tourist and clearly a foreigner, that people would ask me questions on things or that. But it is kind of weird to see that, whereas other people maybe were not so receptive to helping others. There's kind of, you needed to be a bit direct if you needed help, like asking. The phrase would be "sumimasen, tasukete o kudasai," which means "excuse me, can you help me, please?" That's kind of one of the big lines that if you needed help and you asked someone directly, more not be inclined to help you. But if you kind of just sort of look aimless or lost, people tend to not like be proactive in trying to help you.
Nick, can you tell our audience about some of the places where you stayed in your 3 weeks plus there? And what were
Yeah,
some of the advantages and maybe some disadvantages?
yeah. So being a solo traveler, I traveled by myself without any tour guide on sort of my own agenda to go and do what I wanted to do. I stayed at where called a hostel. Sometimes you may have heard of the phrase a capsule hotel. little bit different, but kind of similar. What it really is like a big dormitory with bunk beds. So what happened is you would get a passcode in a room in a hotel, and there'd be usually 8 to 10 bunk beds kind of lined up, and you would share this space with a dozen other people. And for the night, you'd stay in this little bunk bed. You'd usually have your own little reading light. You'd have clean bed sheets, usually swapped out every 3 or 4 days if you're staying there for a long time. Um, the advantages, of course, is that it was relatively inexpensive. You could hang out with if you were traveling with friends, you could get one room together. If you had 12, you'd have the whole could get the whole dorm to yourself if you book it early enough. But disadvantage, of course, is that you're sharing it with strangers. But I found mostly everybody was in kind of the same boat. So there might be some worries about, oh, are people going to mess with my belongings or whatever? But kind of everybody had that same mentality. So by being so protective of your own stuff, you didn't really worry about other people touching your things because they too were worried about other people touching their stuff. So, but I found it worked fine as a solo traveler. It was relatively inexpensive. I think for the most part, I paid less than $100 a night. I did stay at a nice hotel in Uji when I was there that had one of those onsen spas, hot spring spas built into it. So you could go and do that in the evening. And that was more like a proper hotel with your own like TV, private washroom and that. In those hostels, there would usually be like 4 or 5 sinks and showers that you'd share with everybody. But for the most part, they were all relatively clean. And if you're traveling by yourself and you don't you're looking to save money, it's a great way to travel, but you do have to be aware that you are sacrificing a bit of your privacy that you might be used to at a hotel, say in Canada.
Nick, what were some of your most memorable experiences in terms of food, some of their music, and sightseeing?
Yeah, music, I don't really have a lot to comment on specifically because I didn't really do a whole lot of music related entertainment. Food and sightseeing, completely different stories. I got to eat all kinds of amazing food. I mean, I did a lot of sort of the stereotypical stuff. I ate at some of the places like Ichiran Ramen and Koko Ichibanya Curry, which are kind of two of their big sort of domestic brand of chain restaurants of kind of Japanese ramen and curry, respectively. I went to a couple of Western restaurants, Burger King, McDonald's, see how some of the differences they are there in terms of like the staple foods that you expect here, like there's egg McMuffins and there's Big Macs and Whoppers, and they're very similar to what you expect here. But they also had some different, more nation specific ones. An example of the McDonald's one was the McGuraco, which is kind of like um, a seafood cutlet on a small burger patty, but it also had like a barbecue beef demi glace on top, and it's kind of sounds weird and hard to describe. But if you enjoy seafood, there's a lot you can get out of there that you don't necessarily get here. But so there's things like that were interesting to experience. I also got some opportunities to travel around and see and try some um, more Japanese style stuff. There was kure sushi, which is like their conveyor belt sushi. So like you order and it shoots out on this little conveyor belt, and you can order as much as you want, kind of thing. Not quite all you can eat. You did pay per meal, but you could get like 20 pieces of sushi for $10. So it was a really great deal there. And then as for sightseeing, I did a lot of visits to some of the famous shrines and museums. So all the ones I mentioned previously across um, uh, Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. I went to a couple castles when I was in Osaka. So I got to see Osaka Castle, which is more like a museum with a castle shell around it. But then there's also Himeji Castle, which is about an hour west of there by train. That's one that I would recommend that everybody go travel and see if you go to Osaka. It was amazing. Um, but so there was a lot of those kind of things that I did. And then another thing I did as a big part of my travel is I took a lot of the weekends to go see the horse racing. The Japan Racing Association, the JRA, is one of the biggest national entities. Unlike now in Canada and the US, where a lot of sports betting is sort of diluted now with all the sports betting apps and doing everything on your phone. That's really not a thing in Japan. In fact, still one of the only legal forms of sports betting in Japan is on horse racing, and
Wow.
it's reflected in the handle. Last year, 3.3 trillion yen, about 20 billion US dollars, was wagered in handle and horse racing in Japan, whereas in North America, in all of North America, it's only about 10 billion yen and declining. 10 billion US dollars and declining. In North America. So it's more than double is spent on horse racing in Japan. And for a long time, it was the largest sports betting entity in the entire world, larger than sports betting on FIFA, larger than sports betting on the NFL and the Super Bowl. It was the biggest thing and continues to be a big part of Japanese culture in terms of that. Other forms of gambling tend to be illegal. There's things like pachinko, which is it's hard to explain, but they use like beads instead of money as currency. So there's just kind of a loophole around it to play on these slot machines or like these games where you kind of launch all the marbles into the holes and in order to gain more of them. So there's things like that people used to get around it. But in terms of sports betting, that's kind of the big thing. But it's also a big multi-billion-dollar business. There are because of which it's highly regulated by the Japanese government. And there are actually 2 training facilities in Japan, one near Kyoto and one near Tokyo, where every horse in the JRA has to train at those facilities. And they make up some 2,000 horses that race in the JRA on a weekly basis, and they travel all across Japan. Usually they race at 3 different tracks a weekend to race, and it's a huge operation and tons of money goes into it. So that was a really fascinating part of my experience there, and it was a lot of fun because those facilities can easily compete with any NFL stadium that's been built over the last 10 years. They are absolutely gorgeous, well kept, state of the art, and you could tell where the money's going from all the sports betting.
Now, tell us about the dollar exchange, the Canadian dollar to the yen. And do you find over in Japan people use your debit and credit cards like they do over here in North America?
Yeah, good question. So the exchange rate when I went, I don't think it's changed much, but it was around 95 to 90 yen for a Canadian dollar. So if you traded a Canadian dollar, you got around 100, anywhere from 100 to 110 yen, depending on where you exchanged. Obviously, like at the airport and stuff, it was more than if you did it ahead of time. And I think it's still around that price. Main reason is that Japan they haven't reduced the interest rates in the same way that we have in Canada to sort of offset inflation like we have seen here. But what a factor of that is that also wages have tended to stagnate in Japan. So there hasn't been as many minimum wage increases as here. So where you find a meal might be around $15 and $20 in Canada, you can still find meals in Japan for $10, definitely less than $15. So while the exchange rate is about the same, I tend to average about 100 yen as one Canadian dollar. The actual purchasing power was greater, where I could buy more, especially in terms of food, for the equivalent more bang for your buck. For other things, maybe like especially in like Akihabara, if you're buying like anime merchandise or electronics, those were still really expensive. Books is another good example where compared like food, you can buy most paperback books in Japan for less than $15 Canadian, whereas you go into chapters and you're probably paying between $30 to $50 for any decent quality book. So that was a really big difference. So that's where you find the difference. The spending power is a lot greater in Japan than it is here.
Nick, can you tell our audience about your own podcast show called A Small History Podcast, and how often do you record an episode, and where can our audience find your show?
Yeah, so this history podcast kind of stemmed from inspiration from all the stuff Chris and I have done as through the Argo Mounts and sometimes appearing here. I was inspired to do it because I wanted to try to do something that was a bit more uniquely my own, and especially someone with a master's degree in history, a dual undergrad major in history and political science. I want to try doing something where I could finally kind of get my apply my knowledge, my research, the stuff I'm interested in outside of just the Toronto Argonauts and history, and apply more history in general. So that's kind of where I came up with it. And I try to record an episode every week or so. And recently I've also started trying to use a little bit of editing software to build some of those soft skills of being able to, cut out long pauses into things when I'm looking through notes while speaking, and to apply those skills into something more informative and educational. And especially right now, I'm trying to post a lot of things from my trip to provide some context to the history of some of the sites I visited. So that hopefully encourages people from Canada, the US, Britain, England, Europe, wherever else, to try to learn more about it and to have some appreciation for the places they visit. And like right now, a lot of the stuff is kind of oriented on how I plan my trip and what I wanted to see. But over time, I'm hoping to branch out more. I already know that at some point I'm going to have to talk in more detail about the Yasukuni Shrine, which is probably one of the more controversial places that I visited. Because it has a lot to deal with the legacy of the Pacific War, going back to kind of why I studied history in the first place. So those are kind of things that I hope to transform in. And over time, I'd like to do some things about the history of the Toronto Argonauts. I'd like to talk about guys like Ab Box and maybe other CFL times, the Sarnia Imperials. Definitely one thing I've had my eyes on. Call me a turncoat if you want, but looking at the history of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, because nobody's written a book about them in the same way that people have written about the Argonauts or the Bombers or the Riders. So there's definitely some potential there. But then there's just other topics of Canadian history, and this kind of gives me an avenue to talk about whatever I want. If I get sick of talking about Japan, I can always slip in an episode of something else.
And Nick, as we wrap the show up, I was going to talk a little Argonauts, and I wanted to air one of my interviews last week with one of the best special teams coaches in the CFL, one of the good guys. He's from New Hampshire, and Mickey Donovan, two-time Grey Cup champion. And we're going to air his interview right now, courtesy of my YouTube channel, Chris Palme Live with CDP Talk Show. Subscribe, like, and share. And here's Mickey Donovan, the Toronto Argonauts special teams coordinator, interview done last weekend at the University of Guelph's Alumni Stadium. Here live at Alumni Stadium at the University of Guelph for Toronto Argonauts training camp. I have a special guest with us today. He is Mickey Donovan, special teams coordinator, coach with the Toronto Argonauts, two-time Grey Cup champion. Mickey, thanks for coming on here today, and congratulations on your 20th year as a coach in pro football.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a pleasure being here, and love to be out in this beautiful weather, getting to work with the guys, and just finishing off our day 3 pretty strong.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about your career as a linebacker and then transitioning from a player into coach back in 2006?
Yeah, as a player, my first year, I had a torn experience here at the pro level. And with the Ticats at the time, and got re-signed with them for the following year. Went back, first practice back, had a tour, and Liz Frank frac not last too long. I had a cup of tea with it all, but during my time, I really wanted to grow as an individual and player. And quite frankly, what helped me more than anything was being around my coaches at the time when I was in Hamilton. So being around the game, having the love for the game, it just got me with my foot in the door with those injuries happening and occurring the way they did. I took advantage of jumping into a coaching role. And when Greg Marshall, who now just retired from Western, was able to hire a guy, he called me up, and I took a shot and never looked back from it from that moment on.
How much of a transition was it going from a professional athlete, a player, into the coaching staff, and how much of an impact did Greg Marshall and the Western Mustangs have on your coaching career?
Well, it's looking back at everything, it was a chance of a lifetime, an opportunity that was, presented to me by a coach who I truly loved and enjoyed working with, and having as a head coach for that short period of time. Nothing but love and respect for him, and the growth that I was able to get from it, from a young player to transition into that coach experience. It felt like I grew at a level and speed like no other. Even after my first year at Western, I had a job, head coaching job offer to another university up here, and then the second year I had another school call and offered me another job, but I wasn't ready to take those opportunities and those chances yet. And just having that opportunity working with Greg Marshall, and being able to be here today has really given me a chance to grow as a coach from that player aspect, realizing the greatness that he had in him, and he was installing in me. It's just it's been very beneficial and a blessing.
Mickey, being from the States, New Hampshire, how much of an adjustment was it going from the U.S. game to the Canadian game?
Yeah, when I left the University of Maine and came up here and played at Concordia University, it was a big difference. The motioning, never seen it. I seen highlights of Doug Flutie playing back in the day. Was really the first time I saw the CFL game. And because of Doug being from the New England area, he was someone that I knew of. So it was a challenge, but I grew to really love it really fast. Playing linebacker, you're really stuck in the box a little more, especially being the middle linebacker. But at the same time, for me, I thought it was football. I was enjoying it. I loved the competitiveness that I was actually in and around in the city of Montreal, and playing against a school like the Rouge or Laval University. It was a great challenge. Anytime we were playing them, and the amount of friendships that I built from that time was pretty impressive.
Mickey, how did you end up coming to the Toronto Argonauts back in 2022? And just thoughts on Ryan Dinwiddie in his time here with the Argonauts?
Yeah, I was let go by the Montreal Alouettes, still under contract, but Ryan Dinwiddie was the first guy. There was a couple of teams that reached out, but he was the first guy that reached out to me, and I gave him my word that I would come here, and him giving me that opportunity, I had nothing but respect for that man, and loved working here with him. Obviously we won 2 Grey Cups, and couldn't ask for anything better than that. All these coaches that I have worked with or for, that have given me opportunities anytime that has ever occurred to me, I always feel indebted to them.
Mickey, obviously being a special teams coordinator, I wanted to get your thoughts on this too. Obviously the Argonauts look for talent in players, but for the special teams, besides talent, what else do you guys look for guys for your special teams units?
Well, you want the athletes, you want speed, you want physicality, you want guys with a strong FBI. So, when you look at all those phases that you're trying to find in every individual, what stands out the most are those, that we look for as coaches. And then off the field and how they handle themselves, what type of personality they are, characteristics that they carry with them. All those little things, that stuff matters.
Mickey, what's one word to describe yourself and special teams?
Insane. I think that's the best word, because with that being said, only a sane person wouldn't be playing on special teams. You got to be a little crazy, and that mentality is what we all would bring to the table and to the field when it's time to go.
And finally, Mickey, you got one more preseason coming up this Friday, May 29th against Hamilton here at 7 o'clock. Tickets at griffins.ca. What are you guys looking for to see in the special teams, and how difficult is it going through the cutting the guys part of the business too?
The first thing of what we're looking for is just, play a fast physical game. Everyone come out healthy. Get the best looks that these guys can give. Let the eye in the sky, guide all of us, and make those final decisions. And making those cuts, it's probably one of the toughest things that I've ever been a part of in any type of sport. These guys, it's something that, when you look back, we were all in those situations. And it's something that, you don't wish for anyone. You've been doing the sport for since we were kids. It's part of our life, and you want to stay with it as long as you can. So when it's taken from you, a piece of you truly does go.
Well, Mickey, I want to say thank you so much for doing this interview, and good luck Friday night against Hamilton, and continued success in the 2026 season.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, brother.
Nick, thoughts on my interview with Mickey Donovan, the special teams coordinator for the Toronto Argonauts?
Yeah, it was a great interview. I love Mickey Donovan talking about that you have to be insane to be a special teams player. But for many of these guys, that's how they first make a name for themselves when they come into the league. We've seen guys like Jack Cassar, for example, who comes in and makes a star out of himself on special teams, and now has these opportunities first as a linebacker, and now getting some opportunities as a running back and sort of as a go-to pass blocking guy now. And I mean, it's cool to learn some of Mickey Donovan's backstory as well, especially with the Western Mustangs. I mean, Greg Marshall, Grey Cup with playing for the Edmonton Eskimos in 1982, 4 Vanier Cups, 23 Yates Cups. Like, there's no better person to learn from than Greg Marshall. And now Mickey Donovan with 2 Grey Cups of his own. It's sometimes, as he kind of mentions there with the cuts, the hard transition and pill I think that a lot of athletes have to swallow is when you reach that point where you have to accept that you need to stop playing, and that can come, like I experienced it when I was in high school, because I knew I was never going to play in university, but it can be at different stages for everyone, and when you're at that level and you're so close to making it and being that guy being cut, it can be a real challenge. But for someone like Mickey to turn into a positive, and now he's one of the top special teams coordinators in the CFL. It's a really awesome thing, and I'm really glad that he ended up deciding to stay this year. It's easy when coaches move around from place to place, like Ryan Dinwiddie did to Ottawa, that some of the assistant coaches follow them wherever. So it was nice to see Mickey Donovan stay, especially because, like, as you saw, this personality how he was in being interviewed by you, he's one of the few coaches that always goes out of his way to say hello to fans at Guelph and at practice. So it means a lot to me as a fan to have him sticking around with the organization.
I'm happy he stayed with the Argos, but I really thought because of his relationship with Ryan Dinwiddie that he might have gone to Ottawa. But it's a win for the Argos situation because I think Mickey Donovan is one of the better special teams coaches, and he's very approachable and very thoughtful. And I could have probably talked to him for like 2-3 hours, but he was nice enough to give me some time. Thanks to Chris Belnovich for arranging that interview with Mickey Donovan. And that day I also got to talk to Nathan Walker, the York University punter who was cut by the Argos, but he says he'll be back with the Argos next year. Nathan is going to go back to York in finishing his 5th year in schooling, and he's going to be back in the CFL next year as well. And Nathan Walker will, when we do our next Argo Bounce podcast show, I'll air the interview with Nathan Walker on. Really good guy and somebody to root for too.
Great.
Now, Nick, if you got a few more minutes, just quick thoughts. I don't want to go over it for an hour. It's preseason. Just thoughts on the Argos' 20-14 preseason loss to the Tiger Cats, and who were some players that might have stood out for you for the Argos?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I know we're at almost an hour now and going. I mean, it's definitely a preseason game. All the first string guys didn't play for the Argonauts, and most of them didn't play for Hamilton, even though they dressed. So it really is gauging on who you think are going to stick around versus who are going to who you're going to cut. And I mean, I think what you found was a lot of the secondary guys who were being tested there didn't seem to do well. That was kind of the thing that set them short. Offensively, too, the tackles really struggled from what I saw. But there was There wasn't a whole lot, I think, that you could really take out of it other than maybe the defensive line play. Parashan was, I think, the guy who stood out for me as the big guy. And then Owen Goss also had that one interception, and he had a couple of other big plays, so he looked good. So those will be the two guys I will shout out.
Nick, which players were cut that surprised you the most? I know everyone's talking about Aaron Casey, who just signed with Ottawa, but who else were you kind of shocked that got cut?
Yeah, Casey was probably one of the higher guys up there on my list. Garcia, the other quarterback who got cut, I thought was interesting. I think it was between whether they wanted to keep Tucker Horn or go with Garcia. Horn struggled at times, but he was at least able to chip the ball down the field. But it felt like he kind of got what you saw. Garcia was interesting because he had some really high highs when he came in the fourth quarter against the Wind, but also his lows were really low. Like when he took that one snap, kind of fumbled it, and then got sacked for a 20-yard loss that got them out of field goal range. That was probably not a good look. And I think if you're looking at it maybe objectively as a coach, like trying to think, okay, who do you have like in that dark scenario as if you need your third string quarterback in, or if you have the opportunity to develop someone who's more developable. I think they see just a little bit more potential in developing Tucker Horn a little bit further than maybe taking the risk on Garcia. And then some of the other cuts, Anthony Von Dahl, John Boss. I hate to say it, but the O-line didn't do well last year, and that's where I think it's toughest as like when you're evaluating these guys and you're deciding who to keep, who to cut. You want obviously you want to keep guys or give some favorability to the guys who have been for the team the last couple of years, that loyalty aspect. At the end of the day, the team did not do well last year, and at the end of the day, the parts that struggled, that were the problems for the majority of games, was the offensive line and the secondary, and that's where Deshaun Blackburn as well. You see those guys who are veterans getting cut, and it's difficult, but you can only keep so many guys. And when your team didn't perform well, you got to maybe start looking towards newer guys. And in a lot of ways, the Argos addressed it with the secondary was that they brought in a lot of veterans back, Robert Priester, Deshaun Amos, guys of that nature. So yeah, it's a tough decision, but it's the decision that that Pinball and Jim Barker and John Huffnagle decided to make. So,
Thoughts, Nick? Do you feel a bye week is good just after having a training camp concludes? Now, if the CFL had 10 teams or 12 teams, obviously there wouldn't be, but just thoughts on the Argos getting a bye week after training camp.
Yeah, I think it's for the
Argos. Does it help or hurt?
I think it helps more than it hurts in their case. I mean, you look at last year, one of the benefits they have is that they're playing Montreal in week 2. The fact they play Hamilton week 1. We saw last year that Montreal, it seemed like they planned from Toronto all off season for that opening week, because they really kind of schooled us in that first game. I think having that is a little bit advantageous, but there's also 3 teams that have the bye this year as opposed to just one. But I think there's other reasons why it's advantageous, especially for Toronto's situation where we've got to travel around and play all these away games. That extra week to kind of get the players situated in Guelph and eventually in Toronto in 2 months' time. That little bit of a breather to have them figuring out some of these aspects for them and their families, rent, work, how they get around work with if their partners have to, work hybrid, or if there's some weeks they have to fly out back to wherever their home is in the US and work from there. It gives them a little bit more time to figure that out. So I think in that sort of broader scheme, it's more advantageous. It's helpful.
As we wrap the show up, Nick, ask the host CDP a question. Do you have a question for me before we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's target maybe the broader spectrum of these away games. I think they play 6 home games, or 6 games away from home until they're back at BMO Field.
9.
Okay, 9 games. What do you think the record will be going by the time they get back to BMO Field? What do you realistically expect them to do?
5-4. 5-4.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
I know having Chad Kelly back helps too, but I think he's still got a little rust a little bit. He does look good, so I'm not worried about that. I'm still need to get a little more out of the running game. Obviously, the CFL is a passing game. It's not like the NFL, but you still got to get a little more production. So hopefully the Argos and Chad Kelly can scramble, but you also want to protect him too. So hopefully the Argos can get a little more production out of the running game and make it harder for the defenses to stop this offense. I do believe the Argos offense will be better this year and hopefully a little more balance with the running game. My only concern about the defense is the D line, and the linebacker core too. So we'll see. But I think out of 9 games away from BMO Field, I think 5-4 is realistic, or
Yeah,
even 4-5, 5-5, 5-4, or 4-5. Just keep it around 500.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good spot to follow it up. I guess one of the big pieces was the loss of Winnie McManus in the offseason, and we see now he's on the injured list with Hamilton.
He's
He didn't
out.
participate
He's
in
out for
practice this
Thursday.
week. Yeah, so I mean, do you think? What do you think with that regarding the Argonauts, like choosing to not re-sign him? Do you think that was? I guess in a way, I kind of maybe
It's a
hate to say
business
it. Yeah.
business decision. It's based on his age, based on his injury history, and football is a young man's game. So, not that I'm saying Went McManus is old by any means, but it's a business, and he had some injury history last year, and now he's got some here as well. So,
Yeah, he
it's
does
it's
have that. He does have that intangible, though, that kind of leadership element, even when he's not playing. That I think he kind of hoped that somebody like a Darius Pickett or Cam Judge might be able to kind of fill. Because I mean, you've seen him on the silence in Toronto. Those are some
yeah,
big shoes to fill.
yeah. And I feel the Argos feel that Judge and Pickett will do that as well as Deshaun Amos as well, and Robert
Mhm.
Priester bringing these veteran guys in. I don't think you need to have necessarily one, but I think having 4 or 5 of them really helps in that. So we'll see. And as we wrap this show up, we've got week 1 of the CFL coming on, Nick. Montreal Hamilton Thursday at 7:30. Winnipeg Calgary Friday at 9 o'clock, and then Saturday Edmonton and Ottawa. Do you want to make your predictions for week 1 before we start the Argo Bounce podcast show in another week or so?
Yeah, sounds good to me. I'm gonna take maybe a bit of a gamble here. I'm going, despite how Montreal did last year, I'm going to take Hamilton at home in the first game of the season, the upset on Thursday night. Second game, I'm going to go 2 for 2 with home teams. I'm going to take Calgary over Winnipeg, and for June 6th, I'm going to take the Edmonton Elk, the Road Warriors, against the newly reformed Ryan Dinwiddie coached Ottawa Red Blacks. I'm going to put some faith in Mark Hillum and what he's done with having a year to work with compared to Dinwiddie.
Nick, I agree with you on the first 2 games. I'm going to go with Hamilton over Montreal. I've got Calgary over Winnipeg, and I'm going to go with Ottawa over Edmonton. I think Ottawa at home with their new head coach, Ryan Dinwiddie, would like to try to impress them. And with Greg Bell and Daniel Boyer, a former Argo, I like Hamilton, Calgary, and Ottawa to win in week 1 games as well.
Yeah, those are fair decisions. I'm looking at the pick ranking right now of the fan poll. It's about 50-50, slight edge in favor of Hamilton, 53-47. 60% take Calgary at home over Winnipeg, and 68% agree with you. 2 and 3 agree that in Ottawa over Edmonton. Only a third are taking Edmonton on the road in this first week matchup.
And Nick, finally, where can our audience follow you on social media and the best way of contacting you?
Yeah, so on YouTube, you can see my history podcast, A Small History Podcast. And then if you want to reach out to me directly, you can do at Nick Small 38. The tag for my YouTube channel is at Nick Small History if you can't find it through just the search bar. And yeah, I'm always happy to reach out and to respond and help wherever I can. As a historian, I try to be open and objective when I'm trying to cover topics. So I'm open to different perspectives because I know sometimes history can get a little hotly contested, politicized at times from depending on where you're coming from. Especially for me, it can be sometimes a challenge when you look at the history of a country like Japan as an outsider. So to get the views of people living within Japan is always something I appreciate learning from. So yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on very short notice and becoming an audible for me. I appreciate it and look forward to doing the regular season edition of the Argo Bounce podcast show probably in the next 7 days as well. And the Argo Bounce podcast show is available on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, X, Instagram, and on major audio platforms such as Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and wherever podcasts are available. So please check out the Argo Balance podcast show with Nick Saul and myself just before the Argos regular season opener against the Montreal Alouettes on Friday, June 12th at 7 or 7:30 in Montreal. Game will be on TSN and on TSN 1050 with Mike Hogan and Ben Grant, who returns for another year alongside Mike as well.
Yeah, that's exciting. Always look forward to listening to those two on TSN Radio. Enjoy the games that are coming up this week. I'm just super happy that CFL is back. It always feels like when your team does poorly, it feels like a way longer off season when you come off a championship Grey Cup year. So we're looking forward to it. I can't wait. I know you can't either. So as always, those of you who know, listen to us on the Argo Balance. Thank you, Chris, for having me. I'm glad we had a touchdown play with this audible today. And as always, go Argos.
Thanks, Nick. We'll talk to you soon. All right, everyone. That concludes season 13, episode 54, overall 714. And that was Nick Small, the co-host of the Argo Bounce podcast show and the A Small Podcast History podcast show. Again, that was Nick Small, A Small History podcast host, and the Argo Bounce podcast host as well. Nick filling in today for my scheduled guest who canceled due to work commitment. And Nick and I will be back on the airwaves sometime next week for the regular season edition of the Argo Bounce podcast show, season 5. Episode 3. And again, the Toronto Argonauts are off this week in week 1. They have a bye week. The Argos will start their season Friday, June 12th, 7 o'clock against the Montreal Alouettes at McGill University Stadium, again on TSN 1050. And make sure you check out CDP's Toronto Argonauts coverage as the Argos are going to be in Guelph for a couple more months. And I have been down there during their training camp and have already interviewed a number of players and coaches as well. And looking forward to seeing Chris Belnovich and the Argos when they come back to Guelph next week for their weekly practice in preparation for the Montreal game as well. Speaking of live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, my next live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show brought to you by BarryCullin.com is going to take place on Wednesday, June 4th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 on the West Coast, with special guest Nanama Meyer. She is a yoga teacher, mindful coach, meditation teacher, and a life coach as well. So tomorrow night, Wednesday, June 4th, 9 o'clock, actually June 3rd. I made a boo-boo. Doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this show. My next live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show by BarryCullin.com is going to be Wednesday, June 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern with special guest Nanama Meyer, a yoga teacher, mindful coach, meditation teacher, and life coach. And then Thursday, June 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern, I have special guest Kate Soda. She is a member of the 2026 Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame class. Kate had a great year, a great career with the women's baseball team in Canada, and she was also a hockey player too. So Kate Soda will be on this Thursday, June 4th, 7 o'clock, and we're going to talk about her baseball career, hockey career, and being introduced into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2026 on Saturday, June 20th at 1 o'clock in St. Mary's, Ontario. And yours truly will be covering that event as freelance media as well. So again, guys, my next live with CDP Sports Entertainment Talk Show, Wednesday, June 3rd at 9 p.m. with Nanama Meyer, yoga teacher. And then Thursday, June 4th, 7 o'clock, Kate Soda from the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame will be on our show as well. And before we wrap up the show, guys, as always, right now at Barry Cullen Chevrolet, a 2027 Chevrolet Bolt is Canada's lowest priced electric vehicle that has over 400 kilometers of estimate range. Starting at $39,999 MSRP, the 2027 Chevy Bolt LT offers up to 422 kilometers of estimate range. For more information, visit Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. So if you're looking for an electric vehicle, an EV, there's no better one than the 2020 Chevy Bolt. And you can get more information at Barry Cullen Chevrolet dealership through their website, barrycullen.com, or drop by the dealership at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. They have a great selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, along with a great selection of all electric vehicles, EVs, and Cadillac products as well. And also, guys, as we wrap up this show, I'm still fighting a cold. I am feeling better. But if you'd like a personalized video message from yours truly, go to cameo.com and type in Chris Palme, do happy birthday, happy Hanukkah, happy anniversary, congratulations, whatever within reason. So make sure you book your Cameo today. You can also follow me on Blue Sky Social at Live with CDP19 on Blue Sky Social. If you're looking to adopt a pet, please consider the Cambridge District Humane Society, located at 1650 Dunbar Road in Cambridge, Ontario. Telephone number 519-623-7722, extension 0, or visit their website, cambridgehumanesociety.org. All the animals that are up for adoption, their profiles and information are on cambridgehumanesociety.org. There's dogs down there like Duncan right now, and a lot of great dogs down there right now. Gravy, Diesel, Duncan, Blue. Please check out their profiles on cambridgehumanesociety.org. And if you're interested in them, just call the shelter at 519-623-7722, extension 0. Ask for Michelle, and they can book an appointment to see one of these pets that are up for adoption. They do a wonderful job down at the Cambridge District Humane Society with getting animals adopted into good homes and family as well. So Cambridge District Humane Society is just located right across from the Cambridge Center Mall. So at the Cambridge District Humane Society, you can't buy happiness, but you can adopt it as well. Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, again, is live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X, excuse me, Twitch, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I'm still battling a cold, but I am feeling much better. You can also visit my website at beacons.ai/Chris D. Palme on my social media sites. Some of my best virtual and in-person interviews are on there, and you can check out my game night stories through WordPress link there as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about me and see my content, go to beacons.ai/Chris D. Palme. You can also follow me on TikTok at Chris Palme on TikTok. Let's try to get me up to 2,000 followers. So go to TikTok at Chris Palme, follow, like, and share. And finally, guys, live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. The audio version is on these platforms: iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Castbox, LinkedIn, Pandora, Tuned In, YouTube Music, Good Pods. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share. Finally, guys, you can email me at live with CDP Sports Entertainment Talk Show at cpalme19@gmail.com. Any comments, questions, suggestions, feedback would be greatly appreciated. And also, if you'd like to support and contribute to my YouTube channel and my talk show, if you really like my media content, I am on paypal.com. Go to paypal.com at Chris Palme if you'd like to support and contribute my media work through PayPal, or again, go to cameo.com/Chris Palme and book a Cameo video if you'd like to support my media content as well. Finally, guys, you can follow me on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky Social, everywhere except Snapchat. And also, make sure you check out my YouTube channel, Chris Palme Live with CDP Talk Show. Subscribe, like, and share. I'm getting very close to 1,000 subscribers, and I am at 750,000 viewers. So thank you, everyone, for subscribing and viewing my YouTube channel and also my YouTube Shorts. I have a lot of content on my YouTube Shorts, and I was just at the Cheesecake Taco Festival this past Saturday at the Paris Fairgrounds in Paris, Ontario, an event organized by KB Events as well. So please check out my content there as well. I did have some cheesecake, and it was a great time there. The weather was great as well. So I also, please tell everybody, please support small local businesses and these butter tart and cheesecake festivals as well. And they all have great products down there, and they're all small and local, and they're businesses here in Ontario. So thank you so much for that as well. And again, a big shout out to Nick Small today for filling in for my scheduled guest. And Nick will be back on with me sometime next week for our weekly Toronto Argonauts podcast show called the Argo Bells Podcast Show. And speaking of talk shows, if you're a business and you'd like to advertise on Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, the Argo Bounce Podcast Show, or the Small Talk Podcast, you can email me at cpame19@gmail.com or DM me on my social media pages. My prices are very reasonable and competitive compared to traditional radio, and I am on 21 platforms, and my show and my audience is growing constantly as well. I look forward to hearing from you and working along with your business needs to get advertised on my 3 talk shows, including Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show. So if you'd like to advertise on all 3 of my shows or just one of my shows, just please email me again at cpame19@gmail.com or DM me on my social media pages as well. And that is about it, guys. Thank you so much to Nick Small, and thank you, the audience, for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll see you back here Wednesday, June 3rd at 9 p.m. with Nyama Meyer, a yoga teacher from British Columbia as well. Have a great day, everybody. And again, thanks for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports and Entertainment Talk Show, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership here in Guelph.